You think you're falling apart. You're not. Something in you is being deliberately destroyed, and it's happening on purpose. Carl Jung had a name for what you're going through, and it's not a breakdown. He called it something closer to a demolition, one your own psyche ordered. Right now, you might be lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering why nothing feels solid anymore. The job that used to define you feels hollow. The relationships that used to hold you up feel like weight. Even your own reflection feels like a stranger's. Maybe you've stopped recognizing the person people describe when they describe you. Maybe you've started crying at things that shouldn't move you or gone numb at things that used to. And everyone around you is telling you to fix it, to get back to normal, to hold it together. Here's what they don't understand. Holding it together is the thing that's hurting you. Because what you're calling a collapse is not the end of you. It's the only way the rest of you gets to exist. By the end of this video, you'll understand why fighting this feeling is the one thing guaranteed to make it worse, and what actually happens if you finally let it happen. Here is the idea this entire video is built on. Jung believed the human psyche does not break by accident. It breaks on schedule. When the identity you built, the mask, the role, the version of yourself that got you through your 20s and 30s, stops being able to contain who you're actually becoming, it collapses. Not because something went wrong, because something finally went right. Jung called the whole self, the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious combined, the self, capitalism. And he called the mask you wear for the world, the persona. Most people spend their entire lives mistaking the persona for the self. They think the job title is who they are. They think the role, the reputation, the performance of having it together is the whole story. It isn't. It's a costume built early, usually before you were old enough to choose it consciously. And costumes eventually stop fitting. When that happens, the psyche does something radical. It stops reinforcing the costume and starts tearing it down from the inside, whether you're ready or not. That tearing down is what you call a breakdown. Jung called it something else entirely. He called it the beginning of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you were told to be. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. And whether this collapse destroys you or remakes you depends entirely on one decision you're about to make. Here's why that distinction matters more than anything else in this video. Two people can go through the exact same collapse, the same lost job, the same broken marriage, the same silent unraveling at 3 a.m., and come out on completely different sides of it. One rebuilds the same trap, slightly smaller, slightly more bitter. The other rebuilds a life that finally fits. The difference was never the collapse itself. It was what they did while it was happening. And that leaves one question hanging over everything you're about to hear. What exactly decides which side of that line you land on? Jung didn't answer that question in theory. He answered it by nearly losing himself trying to find out. Let's start with the mechanism itself. Why does the psyche do this? Why does it choose collapse instead of a gentle transition? Jung asked himself that same question in the most literal way possible. In 1913, Jung broke from Freud, the man who had been his mentor, his father figure, his entire professional identity. And almost immediately, his own psyche turned on him. For the next several years, Jung lived through what he privately called his confrontation with the unconscious. Vivid waking visions. Voices that weren't his own. Nights where he genuinely wondered whether he was losing his mind. He kept working, kept seeing patients, kept functioning in daylight, while at night his own inner world came apart at the seams. He described it as feeling like the ground beneath him had been pulled away, with nothing solid left to stand on. This wasn't a man having a breakdown in the way we throw that word around today. This was the architect of modern depth psychology, living through the exact process he would spend the rest of his life explaining to others. Here's the part that matters for you. Jung didn't collapse because he was weak. He collapsed because the identity he had built, Freud's brilliant successor, had become too small to hold what he was actually becoming. The persona cracked because the self underneath it had outgrown it. Now think about your own life for a second. Think about the role you've been performing. The competent one. The strong one. The one who has it handled. The one everyone calls when something needs fixing. When that role stops matching who you actually are inside, your psyche doesn't send you a memo. It doesn't negotiate and it doesn't wait for a better year. It just starts pulling the structure down. And your ego, the part of you that identifies with that role, experiences this as something close to death. Because in a way, it is a death. Not of you. Of the version of you that can no longer survive. Jung was precise about this. He said the ego resists its own dissolution because it cannot imagine existence without itself at the center. It mistakes its own shrinking for annihilation. That's why the fear during a collapse feels so absolute, so physical, so much like actual danger. It's not irrational. It's just aimed at the wrong target. You're not dying. A costume is. Jung watched this in his own case night after night, and he made a decision that most people never make. Instead of running from the visions, instead of medicating them away or forcing himself back into the old role, he sat with them. He wrote them down. He let the material speak instead of silencing it the moment it got uncomfortable. That choice to stay present for the demolition instead of fleeing it is the entire hinge this video turns on. But there's something else happening underneath that fear, something most people never get told. A second process running quietly beneath the collapse that decides whether you come out of this broken or whole. Before we go further, this next part is where most people either wake up or scroll past and forget everything they just heard. If what you just read is landing somewhere real, if some part of you recognized itself in that description, do one thing for me. Subscribe to this channel now while it's still fresh. Not for me. For the version of you that's going to need this exact explanation again, at 2 a.m. 3 weeks from now when the collapse gets loud again. Type this in the comments right now before you keep watching. I'm not breaking. I am becoming. Write it. Mean it even if you don't believe it yet. Because belief comes later. Right now we just need the sentence sitting there, waiting for you to catch up to it. Now, back to that second process I mentioned, the one that decides everything. So what actually separates a collapse that destroys someone from a collapse that remakes them? Jung gave this exact fork in the road a name. He called it the choice between what he termed a regressive restoration of the persona and true individuation. Stay with me, this is simpler than it sounds. A regressive restoration is when someone goes through the collapse, feels the terror of it, and then patches the old mask back together. Same job. Same relationships. Same performance, maybe with a new haircut or a new morning routine layered on top. Just glued back on, slightly more fragile than before. Jung watched this happen with patients constantly. People who had a genuine crack in their identity, a real opening towards something deeper, and instead of walking through it, they sealed it shut. They called it getting back to normal. Jung called it a tragedy. Because the same pressure will build again. It always does. The mask never holds the second time the way it held the first, and it holds even less the third time. Individuation is the other road. It's harder. It's slower. It offers no guarantee and no fixed timeline. And it requires something most people are never taught how to do. Staying inside the collapse long enough to let it finish its work instead of rushing to feel okay again. This is the difference between intelligence and consciousness. Intelligence will find you the fastest way back to comfort. It will help you numb, distract, perform, achieve your way past the discomfort, and it will do it efficiently. Consciousness does something slower and much less comfortable. It asks you to actually look at what's collapsing and why without rushing to close the wound. Most people are intelligent enough to avoid their own individuation for an entire lifetime. Jung believed very few people ever complete this process. Not because it's rare to be offered the chance. Because it's rare to accept it when it finally arrives. Ask yourself something right now. When your life last cracked open, a breakup, a diagnosis, a career falling apart, a version of you quietly dying, what did you do? Did you patch the mask or did you let it stay broken long enough to see what was underneath? There's no wrong answer, not yet. There's a third move too, one Jung watched people reach for constantly, right alongside denial and hyperproductivity, and it deserves its own name. Escape. The new city, the new relationship, the new project, the total reinvention that changes everything on the surface and nothing underneath. It feels like progress because motion feels like progress. But motion is not the same thing as movement, and Jung was careful to separate the two. You can run for a decade and still be standing exactly where the collapse first found you, just further from home and more exhausted. But there is a cost to the wrong answer, and it's bigger than most people realize, because what gets buried during a rushed recovery doesn't disappear. It waits. And it comes back wearing a different face. Jung saw this constantly in patients who arrived at his practice in their 40s and 50s. They described a first collapse, quietly survived in their 20s, patched over, never examined. And now, decades later, the same pressure had returned, except this time it came with interest, with a marriage attached to it, with a career attached to it, with far more to lose. The lesson was always the same. A postponed collapse is never a cancelled one. So if patching the mask always fails eventually, why do so many people keep doing it over and over even after they've felt it not work? The answer isn't willpower or ignorance. It's something very specific that happens the moment a person tries to fight the process instead of letting it move through them. So why does resisting the collapse make it so much worse instead of gentler? Jung had a specific word for what happens when you push too hard against something rising up from inside you. He called it enantiodromia, the tendency of anything pushed to its extreme to flip into its opposite. Push denial hard enough and it turns into collapse anyway, just later and louder. Push control hard enough and it turns into chaos. Push the mask on tighter and eventually, it doesn't crack quietly. It shatters all at once, usually in public, usually at the worst possible moment. There are 3 moves people make when the old persona starts failing, and Jung watched every one of them fail to work. The first is denial. Pretending nothing is happening, smiling through it, telling everyone and yourself that you're fine right up until you clearly aren't. The second is hyperproductivity, and it's the most dangerous of the 3 because it looks like strength instead of avoidance. Working harder, achieving more, filling every hour so there's no silence left for the collapsing structure to be heard in. It gets praised. It gets promoted. And underneath it, it burns through a person from the inside out. The third, as we already named, is escape, running towards something new so you never have to sit still with what's old. Jung said something about this that still lands decades later. He described neurosis as suffering that hasn't found its meaning yet, pain the person hasn't been able to make sense of. Not weakness. Unprocessed truth, waiting for someone to finally stop outrunning it. Here's the part that should genuinely concern you if you recognize yourself in any of this. Denial, hyperproductivity, and escape all do the exact same thing dressed up 3 different ways. None of them stop the collapse. They just delay it and compound the interest until the bill comes due somewhere you didn't expect. And when it finally does come due, it arrives with something specific attached to it. Something most people mistake for going crazy, when it's actually the most important material in the entire process. Jung called that something the shadow. It's the single most important concept in this entire video, so let's be precise about what it actually is. The shadow is not evil. It's not your dark side in the cartoon sense people like to use. The shadow is everything about you that got rejected. By your family, by your culture, by the version of yourself you built to be acceptable. Anger that wasn't allowed in a house that only had room for calm. Ambition that seemed too much in a family that valued staying small. Needs that got labeled selfish the moment you voiced them out loud. Grief that had no space to be felt because everyone around you needed you functional. All of it gets pushed underground because keeping it hidden felt safer than facing what it might cost you to show it. Here's what Jung discovered working with patients in the middle of exactly this kind of collapse. When the persona cracks, the shadow doesn't wait politely for an invitation. It floods upward all at once, with none of the manners it was trained to have. That's why collapse often comes with feelings people don't expect. Sudden rage at people who didn't do anything in this moment to deserve it. Grief for things you thought you'd already made peace with years ago. Desires you spent years being ashamed of, suddenly impossible to ignore. This isn't you falling apart. This is the part of you that was never allowed to exist, finally getting let out of the basement. Jung was clear about the response this triggers in most people. They panic, and they do exactly what got them into this position in the first place. They repress it again, or worse, they project it outward. Projection is when you can't tolerate seeing your own shadow, so you locate it in someone else instead, where it's safer to attack. The coworker who obviously has an ego problem. The family member you can't stand to be around for reasons you've never quite examined. The stranger online whose opinion makes your blood boil for reasons that feel bigger than the actual disagreement. Jung's insight here is uncomfortable, but it's precise. What disturbs you most in others is very often a piece of yourself you haven't been allowed to meet. During a collapse, this gets amplified because the shadow material is closer to the surface than it's ever been. You'll notice people irritating you more than usual. You'll notice yourself judging things you used to ignore completely. That's not coincidence. That's your own repressed material looking for a mirror, anywhere it can find one. The question is what you do once you notice it. Do you keep pointing outward? Or do you finally turn and look at what's actually been standing behind you this entire time? Because the moment you do, something else starts happening, something Jung considered almost mystical. the world itself starts talking back. Jung didn't ask patients to simply think about their shadow either. He had them paint it, write it, sculpt it, give it a shape outside their own head so it stopped running the show from the dark. He called this active imagination, a deliberate conversation with the parts of yourself you'd normally silence on sight. It sounds strange until you try it and realize how much quieter your own mind becomes once the exiled parts finally get a hearing. Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, events with no causal connection that nonetheless feel loaded with significance. He didn't mean magic. He meant something more precise and honestly more useful. During deep psychological transitions, people report an almost uncanny increase in symbols showing up in their lives. A song lyric that answers a question you've been silently asking for weeks. A stranger's offhand comment that lands like it was aimed directly at you. Recurring numbers, recurring names, recurring dreams, all circling the same theme over and over until you can't pretend not to notice. Jung didn't think the universe was sending you messages in some supernatural sense. He thought the unconscious during a collapse becomes so activated, so close to the surface, that it starts recognizing patterns everywhere. Because for the first time in years you're actually paying attention. This period has an older name too, one Jung borrowed from the mystics. The dark night of the soul. A stretch of time where nothing feels certain, where old meaning has dissolved, and new meaning hasn't arrived yet. Jung considered this not a detour but a required stage. He believed real psychological maturity, what he called the second half of life, the shift from building an identity to actually living from one, could not be reached without passing through exactly this kind of darkness first. Think about that for a second. The disorientation you're feeling right now, the sense that you don't recognize your own life anymore. Jung would say that's not a sign something has gone wrong. It's a sign you've finally reached the part of the process that actually matters. Most people spend the first half of life becoming someone, building the career, the reputation, the persona, the version of themselves the world will reward and reward quickly. Jung said very few people ever attempt the second half. Unbecoming just enough to let something truer take that structure's place. The dark night is the entrance to that second half. Not a punishment, a threshold. And here's what almost nobody tells you about thresholds. The people standing on the other side of yours are not going to understand what you're walking through, and some of them are going to actively resist you crossing it. Jung himself lost friends, colleagues, an entire professional circle during his own dark night. People who had admired Freud's successor had no framework for the man who emerged instead, quieter, stranger, less concerned with being agreed with. He didn't get their understanding back by explaining himself more clearly. He got it back eventually by simply continuing to be who he'd become until the explanation stopped being necessary. Why does the world react to your collapse like it's a problem to be fixed? Because for the people around you, your old persona was useful. The reliable one, the agreeable one, the one who never made things complicated no matter what it cost you privately. When that structure starts cracking, it doesn't just disrupt you. It disrupts everyone who built their expectations around the old version of you. Jung noticed this pattern in family systems especially. He observed that a person's individuation often gets labeled by the people closest to them as selfishness, instability, or even something close to betrayal. Not because those people are cruel. Because your collapse is quietly forcing a mirror in front of them too, whether they asked for it or not. If you're allowed to stop performing, if you're allowed to want something different, if you're allowed to say no without collapsing under guilt, it raises an uncomfortable question about everyone still wearing their own mask a little too tightly. That's the real reason independent thought makes people uneasy. It's not the disagreement itself. It's the demonstration that disagreement is even possible and survivable. Jung believed that once a person begins genuinely thinking for themselves, once they stop outsourcing their sense of self to the group, they become almost impossible to manipulate. Mass mentality, the comfort of believing what everyone around you believes, loses its grip, one honest thought at a time. And people who have built their entire stability on group agreement tend to punish whoever stops agreeing. This is the price Jung was honest about. Individuation is not a popularity contest, and nobody hands out applause for quietly refusing to perform anymore. Some relationships will not survive your becoming conscious. Some people will prefer the version of you that was easier to manage and easier to predict. And here's the part that stings the most if you're in the middle of this right now. The people calling your collapse a mistake are very often the ones most invested in you never changing. That doesn't make them villains. It makes them human, protecting their own comfort the same way you were protecting yours before all of this started. None of this means you owe anyone an apology for finally telling the truth about who you are. It just means you should expect the reaction instead of being blindsided by it. Knowing the cost in advance is what lets you pay it without resentment. But there's a trap on the other side of this too, one Jung warned about just as seriously. Because waking up to all of this can curdle into something almost as limiting as the sleep you just walked out of. Here's the trap. Once you start seeing the mechanism, once you understand the persona, the shadow, the whole architecture of how people stay asleep, it's tempting to start looking down on everyone still inside it. Jung was direct about this danger. He warned that individuation, done wrong, produces not wisdom, but isolation dressed up as superiority. People who wake up halfway often mistake seeing the system for standing outside it entirely. They become cynical, distant, quietly contemptuous of anyone who hasn't figured it out yet the way they have. That's not individuation. That's just a new mask built from disdain instead of agreeableness, and it fits just as poorly. Real integration looks different. Jung called it holding the tension of opposites, the ability to see the mechanism clearly without needing to punish the people still caught inside it. This is the actual turning point, the one this entire video has been building toward. It's not the moment you understand what's happening to you. It's the moment you stop trying to fix the symptom and start actually living through the process. Fixing the symptom sounds like this. How do I stop feeling this way? How do I get back to normal? How do I make this discomfort go away as fast as possible? Living through the process sounds completely different. What is this collapse trying to show me? What version of me is this clearing space for? What am I finally allowed to feel now that the old performance has stopped working? That shift from managing a symptom to trusting a process is the entire difference between someone who breaks and someone who transforms. And on the other side of it, something Jung described almost tenderly, waits for the people who make it through. He said individuation doesn't make a person perfect. It makes them whole, which is a very different and much more honest kind of finished. Whole means the anger, the grief, the ambition, the shadow, all of it integrated instead of hidden, instead of exiled. Whole means you stop needing everyone to agree with you, and you stop needing to prove anyone wrong. You just live from a center that finally belongs to you. That's what's actually on the other side of what you're going through right now. Not comfort, not certainty. Something steadier than either of those, and it's closer than you think. You'll know you're getting close when the question changes on its own. It stops being, how do I make this stop? And starts being, what is this making room for? That single shift in the question is the whole process compressed into one sentence. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. You are not falling apart. You are being demolished, on purpose, by the only part of you that has ever actually known what you need. Think of it like a building that's been outgrown. You can keep patching the walls, propping up rooms that no longer serve anyone, spending your whole life maintaining a structure that was only ever meant to be temporary. Or you can let it come down fully and build something from the foundation up that can actually hold the person you're becoming instead of the person you used to be. There is no third option. The pressure you're feeling right now doesn't go away on its own. It only asks you over and over which direction you're going to choose. Resist and rebuild the same walls weaker each time until they can't hold anything at all. Or let it fall and finally build something true. This is not a decision you get to make once. It's one you'll be asked to make again and again for the rest of your life. Every time an old version of you stops fitting who you're becoming. If this reached something real in you today, don't let it end here. Subscribe so the next explanation finds you exactly when you need it. And before you go, answer this honestly in the comments. Are you still patching the walls, or are you finally ready to let it fall? Whatever you choose, choose it consciously, not by default, not because collapsing quietly felt easier than admitting what's actually happening. You didn't come this far just to rebuild the same small room and call it safety. The building was never the point. What it was protecting always was